So I'm now back with you for the second half of this second session on the history of Messianic Jews, Jewish disciples of Jesus. And we're trying to understand the parting of the ways between the Jews and the Christians and the Jewish Christians, or the Messianic Jews, in the middle. And I've said that this is the traditional view, that between the years 70 and 135, there was a separation between the church and the synagogue, and the Jewish disciples of Jesus were caught in the middle. But I'm what's called a revisionist historian. I follow the views of this new understanding by Daniel Boyarin, Paul Fredrickson, and many others, who say that this wasn't really what happened. This is us looking back, and we are putting back into the past our understanding of the present. Because if you look at the present, it seems obvious that Judaism is here, Christianity is here, completely separate religions, which is difficult for me as a Jewish disciple of Jesus, because I'm both. I'm faced with being a Christian by my faith in Jesus, and I'm Jewish because of my family, my background, and my sense of being part of the people of God. So these new scholars have argued that the separation of Judaism and Christianity into two separate religions, two separate faith communities, was unsystematic. It wasn't organized. It was sporadic. It was not universal. It came in lots of different places in different ways, and not complete until the 4th or 5th century, some 400 or 500 years after the time of Jesus, mainly because of the Roman Empire, and that Christianity, once it had become the official religion of the Roman Empire, then turned against Jews and Judaism, because Christianity needed to define itself against Judaism and opposed to Judaism, just as it was against paganism and opposed to paganism. So what Daniel Boyarin calls the partitioning of Jewish Christianity, how it got caught in the middle of these two groups, is difficult to define, and the boundaries or the borders are not easy to identify. This means that when the church was defining its doctrine, especially the doctrine of the Trinity, it was also acting against the Jews and Judaism, and especially against Jews who believed in Jesus. So in the year 325, we have the Council of Nicaea, which debated about the nature of Christ, the human nature of Christ and the divine nature of Christ, and the way that the Trinity was truly one and truly three. Now, I agree with all these decisions about the Trinity and about the human and divine nature of Christ. I'm fully Trinitarian. I fully accept the deity of Jesus, that he is God incarnate, God in human form. But sadly, what also happened was that these councils, at the same time as deciding these doctrines, decided that Jews could not believe in Jesus and still keep any Jewish festivals, could not keep Jewish food laws, could not marry other Jews, could not say Jewish prayers, could not visit the synagogue, could not keep Passover, and in fact they were seen as second-class citizens. So the church fathers were against Jews who believed in Jesus. They were also against Jews generally, but they were particularly concerned with Jews who believed in Jesus in the church. Now you ask, why was this? One reason is because the Emperor Constantine wanted to unite all of Christianity across the Roman Empire. But another reason, it's obvious. Why do you tell people that you mustn't do this? Because they were doing it. In fact, it wasn't until the 4th century, even the 5th century, that Christians separated the date of Easter from the date of Passover. Why? Because all the Christians were celebrating Passover, even with their Jewish friends, and saying this is the festival that Jesus celebrated as his Last Supper. And the church progressively decided, no, we mustn't have this because you're going back to Judaism. This was called the Quartodeciman controversy. The 14th in Latin is Quartodecimus, because the Easter was celebrated on the 14th of the month of Nisan. And the church fathers, particularly the Bishop of Rome, Victorinus, said, no, we mustn't let the Christians celebrate Easter on the date of Passover. So Trinitarian controversies and anti-Jewish decrees went hand in hand, because there were still many Jews in the church practicing Jewish life. Afrahat in Persia, in Iran, wrote many books, and some of them are about the Jews. And Afrahat is very interesting because he has a very Jewish way of explaining his faith. So Afrahat is very close to Judaism, but he's also trying to show how for Christians who believe in Jesus, Judaism is not for them. Cyril of Alexandria, another very important church father, especially developing the doctrine of the divine and human nature of Christ, wrote terrible things about the Jews and also about Jews who believed in Jesus, because he thought that although Jesus was Jewish, Jesus almost gave up being Jewish because he was truly divine, truly Son of God. Now, if you go further than that, you've become a heretic in the church. You've become what's called a Docetist. You think that Jesus's physical human body, which was Jewish, is only an appearance, and that the reality is Jesus's divine, eternal body is the true reality. Cyril didn't quite say that, but he pushed towards that. Now, from the Jewish side, oh, and by the way, the film Agora with stars Rachel Weisz, if you can get it on Netflix or YouTube or watch it, is also about Jews, Christians and pagans at the time of Cyril of Alexandria. And it's a very interesting film. It shows how close these groups were to each other and also how much they fought each other. And then in the Talmud, the main body of Jewish law and tradition, Jesus is mentioned, and followers of Jesus who are called heretics, minim in Hebrew. Minim is often taken to be a short reference to the term ma'amin b'Yeshua HaNotzri, a believer in Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus and heretics are condemned in the Talmud, which is complete by about the 5th or 6th century. But actually, the rabbis in the Talmud don't really know much about Jesus himself, and they don't have first-hand knowledge of Jewish disciples of Jesus, except a few. And the book by Peter Schaffer, Jesus and the Talmud, discusses this. Let me move on then to the medieval period. And here, it's often called the Dark Ages, and we're talking about Christian Europe, where if you were not a Christian, if you were a Jew, a Muslim, any other type of heretic, it was very difficult for you to survive, because the Roman Empire, which became Christian, then became the Holy Roman Empire, and Christianity, particularly Roman Catholicism, was the official religion of the empire, and it persecuted anyone who did not fit in. Jews, Turks, Muslims, witches, sectarians, even Protestants at the start were not accepted. So Jews who believe in Jesus are caught in the middle. And in the Middle Ages, what often happened was that Jews who were Christians were involved in forced dialogues or debates or disputations to try to convert the Jews who did not yet believe in Jesus. Now, this is not a good way to persuade anyone that Yeshua, Jesus, is the Messiah. But sadly, forced conversion, forced debates, forced requirement of Jews to listen to sermons by Christian preachers was normal. And there are several examples of this. I've written about this in my own master's dissertation. Crispin's disputation, the dialogue of Petrus Alfonsi, who was a former rabbi who became a Christian. And in fact, significant numbers of Jewish people did become Christians. But when they did, they were thrown out of their homes. And they were not given food or shelter by their own community. And the Christian community was often very suspicious of them and doubted that they had genuine motives. They thought, excuse me, they thought that these Jews had converted to Christianity for bad motives, for financial gain, or to avoid blackmail, or to avoid torture, which is often the case. So, for example, in England, the king, Edward II, opened up the Domus Conversorum, the home of converts. There were converts' homes in London, in Oxford, in Bristol, quite a few, because when Jews became Christians, they had nowhere else to go. And the king would give them food and lodging and clothing and 1 penny a year, which I think was quite a lot of money. But they had to stay in the home. They couldn't visit their families, and they had to maintain their faith. And this Domus Conversorum actually continued to exist throughout the centuries and even up until the end of the 19th century. One very important debate was the debate in 1263, where Paulus Christiani, Paul the Christian, who was also a Jew, debated with a famous rabbi, Nachmanides, in Barcelona. Now, Nachmanides won the debate, but immediately was forced to leave the country of Spain and go into exile, and he ended up living in Palestine, the land of Israel. And after this debate, a very important book was published by Raymundus Martini called The Dagger of Faith. And I have a copy here. I did my master's dissertation on it. It's about 1,000 pages of Hebrew and Greek and Latin and Aramaic, how to defeat the Jews and also the Christians in debate. And Raymundus Martini composed this with the help, probably, of Jewish disciples of Jesus. You can hear how hostile the relationship is, that the Jews and the Christians are trying to debate each other. The Christians are much bigger and have more power, and they will probably force the Jews to convert anyway. And one rabbi, Solomon Levi, who became the Bishop of Burgos, Paul of Burgos, wrote another manual for how to debate Jews called Scrutinium Sacrarum Scripturarium, the scrutiny, the examination of the Holy Scriptures. And in 1413, there was a debate that lasted for more than a year between leading rabbis and leading Christians. This is a very sad time in the history of Jewish believers in Jesus. But in the Reformation, there were renewed hopes, especially by the reformers, Luther and Calvin and others, for the restoration of the Jewish people back to the land of Israel, and that they would be restored in faith to the Messiah Jesus. Emmanuel Tremellius wrote a book called A Catechism for Inquiring Jews, how to help Jewish people discover who Jesus was. The Puritans in 1660 wanted to allow the Jewish people to return to UK, to England. They'd been thrown out in 1290, and to allow them to come back to England. And the Synod of the Netherlands, a Reformed Protestant synod, considered the need of the Jewish people to come back to their land, the land of Israel, but also to come back to the Messiah. In 1718, John Toland wrote a book called Nazarenus, where he looked at three types of Christians: Jewish, Gentile, and Mohammedan Christianity. And he argued there that there should be a form of Christianity called Jewish Christianity, where Jews who believed in Jesus could still practice the Sabbath, keep the kosher food laws, and live as Jews. In 1720, Rabbi Judah Monis, a rabbi in the New World in America, became a Christian and published his testimony and became a Hebrew teacher at Harvard University. That's his book on the slide. From the Reformation hopes became the 19th century modern missionary movement. A very famous church historian, August Neander, Neander means new man, who was Jewish, was baptized in 1806. In 1809, the London Society for the Promotion of Christianity amongst the Jews, an Anglican mission society, was founded by Joseph Christian Frey, a Jewish disciple of Jesus. And he got together in 1813 a congregation of Jews who believed in Jesus called the B'nai Avraham, the sons of Abraham, some 41 members. So the London Society was the first modern mission to Jewish people, and many others followed. It translated the New Testament into Hebrew in 1817. There were already some other translations. In 1837, the Anglican prayer book was translated into Hebrew. And in 1842, a rabbi who became a Christian, Michael Solomon Alexander, he was rabbi in Plymouth in the south of England, was then a teacher of Hebrew in London University, became the first Anglican bishop of Jerusalem and the first Jewish Christian bishop in Jerusalem since the time of the early church. In 1843, the Catholic order, the Notre Dame de Sion, Our Lady of Zion, was founded by two Jewish converts to Roman Catholicism, the Ratisbon brothers. So in the 19th century, a large number of Jews become Christians, some because they want secular education, because they want to be treated equally in the secular world, others for genuine spiritual reasons. They were searching for God and they found Jesus. I blog about this a lot on my website, On This Day in Messianic Jewish History. If you're interested in some of their stories, do visit that website. So the 19th century, it's been estimated that there were some 225,000 Jewish disciples of Jesus at the end of the 19th century, and maybe millions throughout that time. And the 1866 formation of the Hebrew Christian Alliance of Great Britain was key to the coming together of Jewish disciples of Jesus. In 1866, Samuel Schwartz founded this small group, but it then spread. In 1883, a community in Kishinev in Moldova, Russia, was formed by Joseph Rabinovich. That's a picture of him there looking over Jerusalem. And according to his story, he then had a word of knowledge, a word of inspiration, saying the key to the Jewish problem is our brother Jesus, Yeshua Achinu. And he accepted Jesus not only as his brother, but as his Messiah. And he got this congregation together, the Israelites of the New Covenant in Kishinev, and news of it spread around the world, in America, in Europe, wherever, and other groups started forming what they called Hebrew Christian churches. Alfred Edersheim, a Jewish Christian from Hungary, Budapest, was an Oxford lecturer in the Septuagint. He wrote a massive 2-volume work, The Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah, looking at the story of Jesus from a Jewish perspective. In 1910, Paul Levertov, who was from a Hasidic Jewish background, who was really part of a group of very strict Orthodox Jews, became a Christian, became an Anglican clergyman, and published a communion service which uses both Jewish and Christian elements, called the Meal of the Holy King. And in 1925, the International Hebrew Christian Alliance was formed, based on the Hebrew Christian Alliance of Great Britain, but with national alliances in every country where there were Jews who believed in Jesus. Founded by Sir Leon Leveson, who was knighted for his services to the king, to the British Empire, as it was called then, and Harcourt Samuel, who was a friend of mine and somebody with his family who were Jewish and Christian. So the Hebrew Christian movement of the 19th century really was a large movement of Jews who became disciples of Jesus. Most of them were simply Christians who had a Jewish background, and they did not, most of them, belong to Hebrew Christian churches or Messianic congregations. And then we have the 20th century, and of course, with the Holocaust, we have the terrible tragedy of 6 million Jewish people being put to death. And it is estimated that 225,000, the number that I gave you earlier, of those 6 million were Jews who believed in Jesus. Some of them managed to escape, and I write about this in my blog, but many simply lost their lives with their people. Some, for example, Edith Stein, who is now a Catholic saint, a Jewish philosopher who became a Catholic nun, and many others. So from the 1940s and 50s, there is a sadness and a shadow and a darkness. And although there are some Jews who believe in Jesus, there is not so much happening. But Jack Mundell, Ernest Lloyd and others are sharing the gospel with Jewish people in South Africa. Jacob Joch, a Jewish man from Poland who became an Anglican clergyman, starts writing some of his important books. But we are in a time where there is a sadness and a darkness. It's not until we come to the early 1960s and 70s that the Messianic movement, the movement of Messianic congregations and synagogues, really begins. And this is because of the Jesus movement in the United States in the 1960s and 70s. A large number of hippies become believers in Jesus. And in that large number of hippies, many of them were Jewish. So in the 1960s, you have the Jesus movement in the United States. You also have the Six-Day War in 1967, where Israel manages to not only survive against its enemies, but recaptures Jerusalem and takes over the West Bank and Gaza. And Jewish consciousness and Jewish pride become very important. So in the 1960s and 70s, a large number of Jews become disciples of Jesus. They're conscious of their identity as Jews. They do not want to give this up, and they form Messianic congregations and synagogues. I will cover this more in the next lecture. The Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations is formed, a denomination, if you like, of linked up Messianic congregations and synagogues, that's synagogues of Jesus believing Jews. And in the 1980s, this group continues to grow. In the 80s and 90s, we were planting Messianic congregations around the world. There was one in London, there's in Paris, in Germany. I'll show you a map in a moment. And then in the 1990s and around the year 2000, there becomes more expressions of Messianic Judaism. I will come into the expressions in the next lecture. But let me just show you that Messianic Judaism is both a Jewish form of Christianity and a Christian form of Judaism. And I would estimate now about 150,000 self-identifying Jewish disciples of Jesus in a Jewish population of about 16 million. More than 500 Messianic Jewish congregations who all practice Jewish identity and faith in the light of their belief in Jesus as the Messiah. You get the best of both worlds and double the headaches. And if we look at the numbers, I give the figures for the numbers in some of the articles I've written. You could even say 144,000, but I'm not a prophet or the son of a prophet, and I work for a non-profit organization, so I'm not predicting anything about the 144,000 in the book of Revelation today. Around Europe, there are Messianic congregations all over, as I mentioned, London, Paris, Netherlands, especially in Germany and the former Soviet Union, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova. And if you go to Germany, there are over 20 different Messianic groups all around the countryside. And the German Messianic movement is made up of Jews who have become believers in Jesus from Russian background. They're often people who emigrated to Germany from Russia. Now, I'm going to conclude my lecture here and look at the beliefs of Messianic Jews and why we are Messianic Jews in the following lecture. But if I can just summarize what we've looked at so far, we've looked at the terminology of why we call ourselves Messianic Jews, some people Hebrew Christians, some people Jewish Christians, and also the main historical periods for Jews who believe in Jesus. But I want to stress again that you cannot really understand the history of Messianic Jews without understanding the history of the church and the history of the Jewish people and the way that we as Messianic Jews are caught in the middle of two groups. So I give you my own personal story that I'm brought up Jewish. I attended synagogue. I became a believer in Jesus. I'm happy to be in any church where they love Jesus as Messiah and Lord. But my primary identity is as a Jew who believes in Jesus, a Messianic Jew. So we've just had the celebration of the main Jewish festivals, Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur. And today we begin the celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles, Hag Sukkot. So how do I celebrate these festivals? Well, I have a Messianic Jewish service. If you're interested in our Jews for Jesus Rosh Hashanah service or Yom Kippur service, you can find them on our website, Jew in the Pew, in the YouTube, on a YouTube channel. I celebrate as a Jewish disciple who knows that Yeshua Jesus has fulfilled these festivals. But I also join my family and my friends and my community by worshipping in a virtual synagogue, because we're in the time of the coronavirus and all the services now are being streamed online. I attend the Rosh Hashanah service and I attend the Yom Kippur services in the synagogue. I do it knowing that Yeshua Jesus has done the atonement for my sin, has made the sacrifice for my sin, has died on the cross and has risen again. Most of my people are still waiting for the Messiah, but I am part of both. As Leon Levinson said, I am a Jew by race and a Christian by grace. And he said that in the 1920s when race was not a provocative term, but he really meant the same thing. He was born a Jew, raised a Jew, died a Jew. But by faith in Yeshua, the Messiah, he did not stop being a Jew, but he was completed as a Jew. And I would say that when you become a disciple of Jesus, whatever nationality or background you're from, British, French, German, Korean, Jesus sets you free to be all you're meant to be. Your identity is fulfilled in him. And when you're Jewish and you believe in Jesus, your identity as a Jew is fulfilled when you know the Messiah. Thank you for watching. We'll pause there. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.